And there we go. Good morning, everybody. Congratulations. You made it through the week. We are live. My name is Bryan Armentrout, and if you're here, welcome. This is the Food Safety Chat Live, and we do this every Friday at the same time, 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain Time. And we broadcast on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and we talk about all things food safety, and we're so glad that you're here. So I'm with very special guests today, Jose Sabal from Sabal Food Safety Consulting. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good, Bryan. This is just fine. Teaching classes like crazy, like always.
Mm-hmm. If you haven't had a chance to take a class with Jose, definitely do it. He is one of the best food safety instructors out there. So highly recommended. I don't think I've ever seen a case where you did not get a 5-star on your reviews for people. So they absolutely love him. And as you can tell in these chats, right? He's one of the things that is the hallmark of someone who really understands is, number one, right? You hear people who say, if you really want to understand something, teach it. And Jose really understands these topics. But also importantly, and this is something that's very important for people like us who work in technical fields, is you have to be able to talk to non-technical people and explain why we do what we do and why it's so important. So Jose helps you build that skill set. Robert, good morning. Oh, look at this. Yeah, so I saw some pictures, Robert, of you online on LinkedIn of some of the meetings you're having over there in Vietnam. So my goodness, thank you for joining us. This is awesome. Alexis is here. Thank you. Very glad that you're here. And so good morning from, it looks like your chat's working as well, Jose. So if you are new to the chat, one of the things that we love to do here is interact. And so this is what you will see with this is not a presentation of us just talking at you. This is meant to be a discussion around food safety, because as we know, food safety improves and grows the more information we share, because it's not a point of competition. And with that, we're here to help educate. And what I always find on this as well, Jose, is we learn some stuff too, right? And we were talking about this with some friends here last week, is that, I mean, those are the most successful people in life. And you see these people on YouTube, or maybe you're lucky and you have family members, the 90-year-old who's, your great grandmother or something like this, who's going out and trying new things and learning how to weightlift or all these crazy things, right? Life is about learning, and we need to continuously learn and grow through our entire lives. And I think that's really a key to happiness, is being able to do that. So never stop growing and learning.
Yeah. 100 with me, 100% here.
Yep. Yeah. And so it's so happy to see some of these regular smiling faces here as well. So Cheryl, Tam, Marin, so glad that you guys are here this morning. So one of the things that we love to do here on the chat, please join us. And so for Robert over in Vietnam, maybe he's having an adult beverage, but join us for a drink. Oh, very nice. Good morning, Ryan.
Mine is very hot still.
Is it? Let it cool a little bit. So with that, guys, let's dive in. So with that, in our topics here today, Jose, is, as we were going through this, one of the things that we like to do, and I think this is really important in food safety and quality assurance, Jose, is getting back to the basics, because a lot of times we just try and get too fancy. We know, right? We read warning letters, and we see every single warning letter is, you failed to do GMPs, you failed to do the basics, right? And then the FDA will list out in that warning letter the failures associated with that. And one of the things I love about having you on the chat, Jose, is we always come back to those basics. And one of the things that you always do, and I know you're going to do this, so I'm going to bring it up now, is let's go back and what are the bases, right? When FDA comes in and says, according to this regulation or according to this law, therefore. So what is the basis when FDA is looking at these type of things for their authority?
Okay. So Bryan, oh my, this is something that every time that I'm teaching one of these classes, people just is blown. Okay. Like you said, and it's funny this year, I believe I mentioned this in our previous chat, but this year I went to DC and took a class for lawyers. Okay. So I'm trying to, not to become a lawyer, of course, but trying to see what we do in quality control from the legal side to understand better, our position. So the law, the food law in the United States, 21 United States Code, number 9, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And my favorite is the definition of food. I'm going to start this conversation, Bryan, talking about the official definition of the word food in the United States. If you need to set up a food safety system, well, if you don't know the meaning of the word food, you're done. Yeah. It's a food safety system. Well, tell me, what is food and what is a system? Okay, so for the definition of the word food and going to the law, I remember this definition very well in my memory, and it's any article that is food or drink for men and other animals. Okay, so basically, when you read that definition, there is no difference between a pack of hay and a package of Oreo cookies. It's food. Okay, and because of that, if we are making human food, and for some reason at some point in time we say, oh, we have a deviation in our process and we need to deviate the product. Oh, we're going to send this to the pigs, to the cows, to the horses, to the dogs, or to whatever. People need to be very careful, because if the product is subject to a deviation where the product is exposed to some hazard that cannot be controlled, the product cannot be sent to animals.
Right.
Okay. Now, the second definition of the word food says chewing gum. And not because you are swallowing the gum, of course, but yeah, the liquids and the flavors and so on. Yeah. And then the third one, it's amazing because it says that all of the ingredients that we use to make food must be food. We cannot use anything that is not food in the making of food. Yeah, go ahead.
That is, I mean, so I don't want to gloss over that because that is so important. FDA has said, here's food, here is not food, right? And everything is based on that.
Yes. So when we're talking about something that is not food, let me give you an example. If I go to the definition of the section of the law for definitions, and I go to the definition of a drug is not food. No. Are both of them edibles? Like people in CBDs are talking, these are edibles. Well, edibles, hold on. Well, what is the category? Are they food or are they drugs? Because if you use a drug in a food product, that is not anymore food. That is going to become a drug.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, people in, to say something, California, can they add marijuana to a brownie? Yes. As long as you sell that brownie within the borders of the state, you're good because it's a state law. But if you try to put that brownie in interstate commerce, you're done. You're committing a crime. Oh, by the way, remember that the food law carries criminal consequences.
Yes.
Okay. So if we're not complying with that, we're going to have some lawyers involved in the issue because it's a criminal thing. Okay. Right. Now, what is another thing that is not food? Okay, I'm going to start with the simple. Hair is not food, and that's the reason why it cannot be included in the food. It's not food. Food grade grease and food grade oil is not food. And if it's present in the product is adulterated. Okay? But the other thing is our topic today, Bryan, metal, plastic, rubber, wood, glass, and you name it. What about that?
Yeah, not food.
Not food. So because it's not food, cannot be present. Now, again, I'm going to put the law aside, Bryan, and I'm going to start talking about systems. So in systems, we control, and then we verify that our controls are working. That's it. Principle number 4, principle number 6.
Yeah.
When we are controlling, the only acceptable control for foreign matter is prevention of inclusion. Why? Because it's not food. It's very simple. If it's not food, cannot be present.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is actually, when you look at the law, Bryan, and you combine that with the requirements of the regulation, actually any measure necessary to prevent the inclusion is in 11780C, because it's manufacturing operations, and then you need to go to number 8. And it's there, it's written.
Right. And right, you had then those two main categories as you're going down through this. So it's like, okay, adulteration and misbranding. And when you read through a warning letter, FDA always states their authority at the beginning of the letter and says, based upon the CFR and the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, your product is adulterated under this and this, and then they list out the violations for that. They're establishing the authority.
Yeah. So in this, I mean, this is something that my father mentioned a few times when I was living in South America, that the same law that someone can use to accuse someone of something, most likely is going to be the same law that is going to be used to defend that person. It's about perception. It's about interpretation. And that is the reason why we need a judge. Okay? So now look at this. When the regulations are created, they are created by these agencies in order to comply with the law. So the law has the intent. And this is what we need to achieve. And like you mentioned, the intent is the prevention of adulteration or misbranding of the food. Now, what is one way that the FDA defines adulteration? In 21 CFR 9 is a Federal Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act, but it's a 342, section 342. How adulteration is defined. If the facilities is a food facility, oh, by the way, this is applicable also to drugs and cosmetics and tobacco and alcohol and whatever, because the definition is the same. Actually, it's the same for the FSIS, for USDA, because it's a definition in the law. One way that your products are going to be identified adulterated is by working under insanitary conditions. Okay? And that is very important. And this is something that I'm explaining in these classes. When the FDA shows up and they look at your facility, if they identify that you're working under insanitary conditions, your products are adulterated by default.
Right.
The proof is not the other way around. They do not need to find the product adulterated in order to say that you're working under insanitary conditions. They just look at the condition and then say, because of this, your products are adulterated.
Right. So an example of that would be, let's say, for example, FDA is in your warehouse. So no open product, nothing of that nature, and they see a rat run across the floor. Insanitary conditions.
Yep. That's a very good example. So talking about foreign matter, Bryan, which is our topic today, if we allow any kind of foreign matter, which, look at the name, foreign matter is not food.
Yeah.
So if it's not food and we need to prevent inclusion, well, if you are finding your product with foreign matter, you are working under insanitary conditions. You already have the evidence that the product is adulterated. You're finding the product with that. But the point is, all of your products are adulterated. Not just the ones that you found, but everything else, because it's about the conditions. So I'm going to use now this background information and discuss a little bit metal, because everybody says, oh, as long as you have a metal detector, you are good. No, you are not good.
No.
Because if you use a metal detector and the metal detector kicks something, and you open that container, and you look inside, and you find a piece of metal, you are working under insanitary conditions. You allow the inclusion of foreign matter into the food, which is a prohibited act.
Mm-hmm.
That's how serious is this. So if you ask me, let's say that I'm an FDA investigator or FDA consumer safety officer or something like that, and I go into a facility, I'm going to say, guys, do you have a metal detector? Yes. Have you found some metal in your products? Because, oh, yes, we found this. Okay, so now you're working under insanitary conditions. All of your products are adulterated. Recall them. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Okay? Because what is a metal detector? Metal detector by default, it's a verification activity in a system. It's not a control. So the problem is that what do you verify in systems? In engineering, what do you verify? You verify controls. So is it possible that you have a verification activity without a control? No. And people do not understand that relationship. And then they have a metal detector without understanding that what they really need to do is to observe all of the potential sources of inclusion of foreign matter and perform, most likely, preventive maintenance, very frequent inspections of all of those equipment, utensils, the facility itself, the materials coming in, packaging material, and so on, in order to prevent the inclusion of those materials.
Right. And year in and year out, Jose, foreign material is always in the top 3 reasons for recalls.
Yeah.
Right? It's the salmonella or listeria, allergens, and foreign material.
Yep. So now look at this, Bryan, because this is the other point that is very interesting. Is foreign material a hazard? Not necessarily.
Right.
You may have hair in product. Is that a foreign material? Yeah, you can say that is foreign material. It's not supposed to be there. It's not food. Okay. Is that going to cause illness or injury? No. How do you control that with the GMP? Is that GMP effective? What is a control? Make sure that people is wearing the hairnet. Mm-hmm. And when they are wearing the hairnet should not be like this and you have all this hair, or in the back of your head like this and you have all this hair out. No, the hairnet should be covering everything. And when the regulation says hair, and I'm your worker, and I have this, all these need to be covered.
Yeah.
And if I have a beer, the beer will need to be covered because the regulation says effective hair restraints. If people are using a cap, caps are not covering the entire hair. Who knows who was the last time that cap was washed in order to be brought into the production area?
Yeah, or where it came from. Where else is that hat being worn?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I took my cap because I was hunting some deers and some whatever, and then I touched it with all the blood and all the things on there, and then I'm bringing this into the production area. No.
Yeah. Exactly, because I mean, with hats, right? And I have this visual in my head now, and I have to get it out. Is what are people always doing with their hats, right? They're always, they're playing with the bill, adjusting their hat, moving it around. Mm-hmm. Duncan has a good comment here. Good seeing you, Duncan. This is a little bit like the comparison between EU and USA regulatory frameworks, where the EU is generally biased toward process conditions. The US is generally biased toward finished product standards. A lot of kickoffs were from our old machinery that produced metal shavings off of our mixers. Super frustrating. Oh, absolutely.
Yep. And so now look at this. Let me continue with the idea. So hazards. When foreign matter is going to be a hazard, in the case that it may cause injury, fundamentally. Okay, because remember that the definition of a hazard is something that is going to cause illness or injury. So in the case of foreign matter, I'm going to say that most likely it is possible that illness happened. I don't know, but I'm going to say yes, injury is going to be the first thing. Now, what kinds of injury? And most of the people are very, very focused on size. Mm-hmm. Oh, we need to make sure that it's less than 7 millimeters because the FDA says that it's 7. And the issue is not just about the size. And I'm going to give you an example. Imagine that the metal that is most friendly for processing operations is a stainless steel 316. It's a very specific alloy of stainless steel. Okay. I'm going to say, example number one, I'm going to say, let's say that right next door, there is a metal fabricator, and I'm going to ask them to manufacture a sphere, perfect sphere, polished, that is 0.5 millimeter in size. Can you do that for me? Yes, we can do that. And the next day, I'm going to grab that sphere, and I'm going to call my 5-year-old grandson, and I'm going to say, come here. Example number one. I'm going to put that in a little bit of a cookie, and I'm going to ask him, hey, chew this. What is going to happen? It is very likely that he's going to break a teeth.
Yeah.
Very likely. Now, 0.5 millimeter of a stainless steel. Do you think that that can be detected by a metal detector or by an X-ray? Not likely.
Right.
Not likely. Okay. Are you causing harm still? Yes. But keep in mind that I don't care what is the size of this perfectly polished sphere. This is foreign matter. This is not food. So it cannot be in the food. Okay. Now look at this. I'm going to grab the same sphere, which is foreign matter, most likely not going to be detected by a metal detector. And I'm going to grab my grandson, and I'm going to say, do not chew, swallow. Is that going to cause any kind of injury in his body? No, it will go in and it will go out. And that kid will never understood that he ate a piece of a stainless steel 316. So is that product, just because it's not causing injury, acceptable? No, the product is still adulterated because it's not food.
Not food.
Okay. Now, one of our conversations, Bryan, before we started this, was we said, okay, let's have a conversation about foreign matter. And I was pretty much shocked about the results. And you have the pie that we created.
Yeah, let me pull that up here. Boop. There we go.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So, guys, the orange portion is plastic, and it's the biggest one. Okay. So now I was thinking about this 2 days ago, and I said, okay, so if most of the adulteration of the food with foreign matter is plastic, do we have a plastic detector? Unless you're using X-ray, and unless your product has a density that is different from that plastic that you're using, which is a consideration that we need to take in this case.
Yeah.
You're not going to take plastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, X-ray is definitely not I've got X-ray, that solves everything. No, it doesn't. To your point, I want to reemphasize that. If the density of the product is close to the density of the foreign matter, or if the product you're manufacturing has lots of variability in its density, think of like a granola bar with chunks of oats and nuts and other things in there. Very difficult to find these things.
Very difficult to find. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what will be your most important control for this? Because there is no verification. You cannot verify that control.
Right.
In systems, I'm going to talk engineering now, systems, ISO world. What is going to be your control? Identify all of the potential things from equipment, from tools, utensils, the facility, from people, the buttons of the shirt and that kind of stuff that may fall into the product, and make sure that you do something in order to prevent that from falling.
Yeah.
It's a control based on prevention. It's about preventing the inclusion of foreign matter into the food. That is the intent of the law, because plastic and metal and rubber, whatever, are not food. They cannot be present.
Right.
And metal detectors and X-rays and magnets and sieves and I don't know, maybe colanders, I don't know.
Yeah.
They are all designed to catch something. If that something is foreign matter, you're already working under insanitary conditions, which is a prohibited act in the law.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep on going with the example. Okay, I gave you two different options of a perfectly polished sphere. What about if instead of a perfectly polished sphere, I'm going to a workshop and I'm going to drill a block of a stainless steel 316, and I'm going to grab one of those shavings that is half a millimeter in size, same size as the perfectly polished sphere, half a millimeter. And then I'm going to ask my grandson to those two examples, chew and then swallow. In both cases, he's going to be suffering, cutting his gums or cheeks or tongue or whatever. And if he swallow, anywhere in the intestinal tract, it's going to be cut. Yeah. And this metal could be lodged or stick to certain areas, and the kid is going to need surgery for that.
Right.
Okay. So it's not just about size. It's about the size, it's about the material, and it's about shape. Mm-hmm. And those are things that we need to take into consideration whenever we're performing this assessment of the hazards. Because if it's for whatever reason, look at this one. And I'm just going to tell you, this is a very nice example. So in my auditor life, I audited a few facilities for ice cream. Okay. What is the most typical preventive maintenance activity that is being performed in an ice cream facility? Replacing the blades that scrap the ice cream from the tunnel. Yeah. Okay. Why? Oh, because these blades wear. Oh my! If they wear, where is all that metal? In our bellies. So technically, is an ice cream adulterated? Well, if it's manufactured in equipment like that, yeah. Now, is that adulteration going to cause any kind of illness or harm or whatever? No. Is that kind of a tolerance? Most likely. Mm-hmm. But the product technically is adulterated.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
So now look at these, Bryan, which are the comments and the analysis. And I'm going to thank you for inviting me for this one and having the idea of discussing foreign matter, because with this analysis, I'm going to say, fine, according to that pie that we have in front of us, 44% of the recalls are because of plastic and 39 is because of metal. Mm-hmm. But look at this. We mostly don't have that many controls for anything, any foreign matter. And at the same time, the amount of plastic, I'm going to say is very close to the amount of metal. But we have metal detectors. So we have something for metal. So my question is, if we have something for metal and metal inclusion and glass inclusion is about the same, what that means that in my opinion, I might be wrong, but in my opinion, Bryan, that the metal detectors are not working well. Mm-hmm. Okay. And when the FDA says, oh, you need to be below 7 millimeters, and that's fine. Oh, you should be reading Compliance Policy Guide 555.425, which is the one that the FDA created to help field personnel to determine if the facilities are working under sanitary conditions or not. And there is a section that's there. The introduction says, well, there was a board of people in the FDA that between 1972 and 1997 studied 192 cases of foreign matter inclusion. And the outcome of the board, the general opinion of the board says that any object that is foreign matter that is less than 7 millimeters in size is not likely rarely going to cause illness or injury. Rarely is not validated. It is possible that it may happen. And they say, unless the product is going to be consumed by any of the groups that are typically more impacted by these hazards, which are what? The kids, elderly, pregnant women, and people with their immune system compromised.
Right.
So if you think about that, Bryan, most of the products that are being manufactured, most of the food and drink that is being manufactured in the United States, what is the intended consumer? General population.
I hate that phrase.
General population. You are now including the 4 groups. So if you go through the guidance document, in D as in David, it says, if the product contains a foreign matter that is less than 7, which is typically the range of the metal detectors and X-rays and that kind of stuff, and the product is intended to be consumed by people which are in these groups, the product should be identified as adulterated. What about that?
Yeah. So to reflect that back, I mean, what the agencies are saying is there's a lot of context around this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had a question from Drew here. Thank you very much. How about the stuff that can't be detectable? Stuff we can't identify because we don't have tests to identify what it is.
And you know what? That's a very good question. But again, we will need to go back, Bryan, to the law. We need to understand the law. So we're talking about detection. The problem is not detecting, guys. The most important is not the detection, because if you detect foreign matter, you're already working under insanitary conditions, which is prohibited by law.
Right.
The problem is identifying the source of inclusion of foreign matter and do something to prevent the inclusion. This is 100% based on the frequency of our maintenance program and the inspections of the equipment and the facility and the utensils and the tools and anything that may put some foreign matter into the product.
Yeah. And additionally on that as well, when you look at the recalls from FDA and USDA for foreign material, there is a category for unknown substance, right? So what they have said is that we don't care what it is. It's in the product. It's not food.
Yeah. Yeah. And another one, Bryan, if you look at the pie and you use Pareto, if you take care of plastic, metal, and glass, and by the way, that glass portion in green is applicable. If you look at the data that Bryan and I were analyzing, all of those companies, they were packing in glass. So what is the source? The containers.
Yeah.
The glass containers and breakage during process.
Yeah. If you've ever been in a high-speed filling plant, which has plastic bottles and you have the fillers going around, when there's a mistake on that line and there's a misalignment, those containers explode, right? Glass goes everywhere. Everywhere.
And look at this one. In those cases, Bryan, most of the glass cleaning procedures that I have seen in my life, yes, we're going to be, sweeping the area and cleaning the equipment. But it depends on the equipment. If your equipment has, like you're saying, a filler with a lot of moving parts, is it possible that a little tiny piece of metal is going to be in a place where it's not being cleaned? And then when the rotation of the equipment is going to basically fall down? Yeah, that is possible.
Here's
glass is related pretty much to the containers.
Yep. Here's on the plastic side of things. Here's something that is always a good exercise to do. If you work in a production facility, or if you have plants, go out to a line where product is exposed. So let's say that you've got a packaging line that's going down. And on those machines, Jose, we have installed plexiglass shields, right? We want to keep the workers safe so that they're not reaching in the machines and hurting themselves or things of this nature. We want to make sure the product is protected too. And so the operators during the day are doing what? They're going in and out, in and out, in and out of these machines all the time. And we all know that those plexiglass shields are very fragile. So you'll see little cracks in those shields and things of this nature. And sometimes you'll see pieces that are missing.
Yeah.
And if you ask the quality manager in that plant, okay, there's a shield on this piece of machinery and there's a piece missing. Where is it?
Where is it?
Where is it? How long has that been missing?
Yeah.
Right is the answer you're most likely going to get.
Yeah. And Bryan, to your point, looking back at all of those years of auditing, and I'm going to say, what is the most typical frequency to perform a GMP inspection? On a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And you're going to say, really? So you are opening and closing this plexiglass door, and you have missing parts, and you have cracks and whatever, and you're going to be checking that on a monthly basis? I don't think that you're using a risk assessment.
Yeah. Would you ever dream of verifying your metal detector once a month?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an entire month of exposure for your product.
Yeah. So to my point, which is now comparing metal and plastic. Metal and plastic, guys, as you can see, 44 plus 39 is 80 something. So according to Pareto approach, if we take care of those two and we're not producing glass, we're basically covering 99.9% of the introduction of foreign matter. Okay, yeah. Well, this is the one that is measured. The unknown, we will need to see what's going on. But if you look at that, do we have ways to detect plastic? No. So what that means, because we do have ways to detect metal. So what that means, it is possible that if you look at this analysis, it is possible that because of the metal detector, you may find that there are more cases of metal inclusion than plastic. Mm-hmm. Because there is some sort of something there, the detector. I hate the detector. I mean, detectors are very good to verify the effectiveness of the controls in a system, but alone, they make no sense. Right. You cannot have a verification procedure if you don't have a control, because you verify controls. Principle number 6 verifies principle number 4. If you don't have principle number 4, you cannot have principle number 6. Okay? So according to that approach, do we have a metal detector? Yes. Is that supposed to be somehow working and reducing a little bit, shipping a product to the market that is adulterated with foreign matter? Yes. So are these numbers that we're watching in this pie accurate? Maybe not. Maybe the cases of inclusion of metal are huge. And what we're looking is the outcome of the product that is being adulterated with metal and plastic. But that doesn't mean that those are the cases that are happening at the facility.
Good point. Yeah, these are the things that were detected.
Yeah.
What was not detected?
Yeah. And in the case of metal, and I'm going to talk again, metal. So what can you detect? Well, you can detect, depending on the ones that you're using to test equipment, you can detect ferrous, non-ferrous, and stainless steel. I'm not sure if all of you guys hearing the presentation, what is the biggest size of the 3 ones? Stainless steel, always. And you know why? Because stainless steel is more difficult to detect.
Right.
So if you have a stainless steel that is, I don't know, I'm going to say 2 or 2.5 or 3, whatever, can you detect below that number? No. Is your product still adulterated? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And so something else people forget as well is with metal detectors, the size of those particles that you have in your little verification wands is determined by the aperture size. So the bigger your product, the bigger the aperture that your product goes through the metal detector, the bigger the magnetic field, the weaker it is. Yep. Which is why the bigger the product, the bigger the detection limits on that. So if you are running a 50-pound bag of non-fat dry milk through a metal detector, the sensitivity is going to be significantly different than a tiny little product that's going through the metal detector.
Yep.
Also positioning. If your product is going right down the middle through the metal detector, very different than the sides, right? The sensitivity varies, which is why you bring in, when you buy a metal detector, you bring in a technician who from the company who made that metal detector to set it up and validate its effectiveness.
Yep. Okay. So as of right now, Bryan, we have been talking about foreign matter. Mm-hmm. Is there any other type of physical hazard that is not foreign matter that may cause a physical choking hazards or may cause a physical harm or I don't know, it's going to cause illness or harm in people. Yeah, they're naturally occurring. And what is that? Grape in a 1-year-old. If that 1-year-old is going to eat a grape and the grape gets stuck, what is the problem there? Oh, that kid may die. Is that a physical hazard? Yes, it is. Can you say that a grape is not food? No, a grape is food.
Yeah.
I don't know, a strawberry is food. A blueberry is food. And you cannot say that the pit of the olive is food, but you cannot have olive without the pits. You cannot have fish without spines. You cannot have, for example, crabs or lobsters without the shells. You cannot have meat without the bones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is it possible that you eat a piece of meat and then you chew on one of those pieces of bones and you break a teeth? Yeah. Now, can you create a cow without bones? No, that is not possible.
Well, and actually, this is where technology is crazy, right? Is they are actually making fish fillets without the fish, right? They're making cultures.
Yes.
So maybe in the future, we will have fish fillets without bones.
There you go. So
Crazy.
At that point, you need to remove the physical hazard from the hazard analysis.
Yeah. Well, to your point too, the food itself can be a physical hazard. So we see recalls. There used to be, like 5 years ago or so, there was companies that were importing little jelly candies for children, and they were getting stuck in their throats. And just last week, we saw another one come through. Another one.
Yep. So look at this, Bryan. When I was working in South America, and I was, we were producing this pasteurized blue crab meat. When the ladies are picking the meat from the crab, can we actually do that so carefully in order to prevent breaking the very tiny pieces of bones inside the muscles of the legs? Or no, you will have a little bit of a bone in that product. Why? Because it's natural. It's going to happen. So what is the typical control when those things happen? Labeling.
Yeah.
The grapes. Oh, these grapes may, produce a choking hazard. Be careful with the small children. Yeah. And if my product in, years ago may contain little piece of shell, I'm going to have a statement in my can saying, watch out, because it may contain a little piece of shell. Check the product before consumption.
Yep. Turn around the back of a jar of olives and read on there. Pitted olives may contain pits.
Yeah. Because processes are not perfect. And there is a possibility on a product that naturally is food. Well, our machines are very good in doing something. Now, can you say that the product will never, ever have a pit? No, it may show up, but it's natural. It's part of the product.
Right.
So at that point, labeling is the right control.
Right. Well, and this goes back to, and I want to circle back with a very important point you made earlier, Jose, which is it's your intended audience, right? Listen to what we're talking about now. If you're selling product to children, you need to take that into consideration. What are the choking hazards for the children and things of this nature? We're not going to really get into this one too much because this is really starting to change a lot, is more and more products are being sold directly to children. And we've seen in the past in other things, like consumer product protection divisions and things like this, where remember like a number of years ago, McDonald's and their Happy Meals would include toys.
Oh, yes.
Marketed to children. And those toys were choking hazards. And what we're seeing now, too, is all kinds of products on the marketplace that are marketed to children. Now, think about a small, like a little aseptic package of on-the-go milk or something like this for children, where the mom puts it in a package and it's got a little screw cap on top. And the child takes that off, right? Is that going to end up in a kid's mouth? Maybe. Right?
Very likely.
Right. So if you're at a manufacturer, you need to be thinking about these things.
Bryan, to your point, what is the new name for the potential hazards in 117, in the preventive control for human food? What is the new name? They're not being called potential hazards. They are being called now known or reasonably foreseeable There you go. Is it reasonably foreseeable that this kid is going to grab this cap and put it to the mouth? Yes, that is reasonably foreseeable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the new definition, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. So Duru's got some really good comments here. Thank you for participating. Equipment inspection should happen at the beginning of each batch. Yes. So you cannot, and we need to really, put a big line under this. You cannot rely upon these checks as your only line of defense. I've got a metal detector. I've got an X-ray machine.
No.
Huge mistake. So one of the things when I work with my clients that we'll do is let's go through the entire process and let's look in our process for anywhere we have exposed product, and let's see what can fall into it. You will be amazed, absolutely amazed. So for example, if you have a line that's going down and you have a conveyor belt line, and there's things above that line, there's wires and there's zip ties and there's bolts and other type of things. Is it reasonably foreseeable
there you go,
that one of those could fall off into the product? Yes, it is.
Yes. Yeah.
So should you have an inspection at the beginning of a shift to look for all of those parts and say, is that part there? Yes, it is. Is that part there? No, it's not. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Where is it? Right. Back to my example with that plexiglass cover on the machine. You should be inspecting those every day. If you do that, if the FDA says this shield is cracked, where is that missing piece? Right. Yes, we're aware of that. We do a daily inspection. That is on our work order system. That's going to be replaced in 2 days. In the meantime, we are checking it every day to make sure it doesn't get worse. Is that a good answer? It's not a perfect answer, but is that something that FDA is going to accept? Most likely, right? You're controlling that habit.
Yeah. And because that idea of yours is based on the prevention of inclusion, FDA is going to welcome that approach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're proactively managing the risk.
Managing the risk. Yes.
Yeah, you're not sitting back and just relying on your metal detector. So for example, right, part of this too is looking at, FDA will look at the frequency. So let's say, for example, that you're finding metal in your product 2 or 3 times a week. Oh, my metal detector's catching it.
Yeah, really?
Why?
No.
Why is that happening?
Yeah, my metal detector is collecting a lot of evidence for the FDA so they can come and shut me down.
Yeah. and part of this too that we haven't talked about as well too is the supplier side of things, right? You have you have your foreign supplier programs. What about your suppliers, right? What are they doing to prevent foreign material coming in to your facility?
Brian, you know what? Look at this one. So 2 other things that are prohibited in the law besides working under unsanitary conditions. It is prohibited by law to receive something that is adulterated or misbranded, and it is prohibited by law to ship any product to the market that is adulterated or misbranded. If you guys receive any product that has metal shavings in the product, you cannot receive that because that product is already adulterated. And if you receive it and use it in your process, you're committing a crime. Same thing, your supplier was not supposed to send you that because as soon as your supplier does that, you're committing a crime too.
Yes.
That's how it works. Legally, that's how it works. It's scary, but it is what it is.
Right, which is why it's very important with your suppliers to have continuing guarantees in place.
Yes, I'm not, or eventually asking your supplier, I mean, do you have something in place that is looking for inclusion of foreign matter? And then, well, for the metals, fine, you're going to have a metal detector. A lot of people, Brian, we have magnets. And you're going to say, really? And are they effective? Oh, yeah, they are catching. They're catching what? They're catching material that is magnetic. Now, in a facility, equipment, is it possibly made by other materials that are not magnetic, like aluminum? Yes. Is the magnet going to catch aluminum? No.
Is stainless steel magnetic?
No. The 360, the one that is 100% approved to be used in contact with food, is not magnetic. So we put a magnet, it's not going to work. Yeah, the metal detectors use a different technology by running some currents and creating some feedback and then catching. But still, a metal detector is just guessing. It's a good guess, but it's guessing.
Right. Right. Well, and another advantage that we haven't talked about having really good physical contamination controls in your facility is the consumer and customer side, right? We're talking about the incoming side of things, but also the outgoing. If you've worked in quality assurance and food safety, you get complaints, and you'll have consumers that say, "Hey, I ate your product and I found some foreign material, right? I found a piece of metal. I found a rubber gasket. I found a golf ball," which is real. When you look at the list, golf ball.
And the tip of the finger?
Yeah.
That's scary.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, the things, that you'll get back. So you need to be able, because in that position, you're now being put philosophically into proving a negative. So you need to, as the food safety manager within the facility or what have you, to go back and prove that it wasn't coming from your facility.
Yep.
You may not be able to do that, but you may, if you have good systems in place, you may be able to. So let's say that you get back a piece of foreign material and you do your investigation and there's nothing in your facility that matches it. Okay. Yeah. You may be okay.
Yep. That's right.
Very interesting. So kind of recapping on this, right? So what's interesting with this as well is when you look at the recalls, and again, this is I'll give a good plug to foodindustrycouncil.com. Sean Stevens and his group. Let me put this in here in the comments.
Yep.
And Sean does this at his own expense. As we were preparing for this, this is one of the main references that we use. So it's counsel like a lawyer counsel, COUNSEL, is when you go back and you look at these recalls, most of the recalls that FDA has are class 2, not class 1. Any comments on that?
Oh my, that, you know what? Maybe that is a topic for our next meeting. I don't know, Bryan. I know that a lot of classifications are class 2. I like you, I do follow that. I receive those. But I have never downloaded the data and tried to perform a quick analysis to see what's going on. Maybe that is the topic of our next conversation.
Yeah, very much so. And so most of them, I'm looking at it here right now. And so, unknown, right? So kind of our earlier comment as well.
Yeah.
You don't have to know what it is. So part of this then too is having within your facility a robust investigation procedure, because I've been on the receiving end of this many times, and it's highly irritating. Is that you will come into work in the morning and you will find a rubber gasket that goes in a pipe, and there's a big chunk that's missing out of that gasket, and you're like, oh, okay, now you need to do an investigation. The product is on hold in the warehouse. It's a gasket. You can't run it through the metal detector. It may not be detectable on X-ray. Yep. Where's the gasket? Right? Yep. Is it? So now you need to start tearing apart equipment and looking at strainers and really what you're trying to do. There's only two options here, right? Is it in the product or is it not in the product? And there's only one way to find that out, and that's to find it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very, very difficult position to be in, because if you're running these programs for food safety, now all of a sudden you're getting pressure from operations. It's like, we need to release this product. We're going to short customers and all of these type of things. If it gets to that point, that's a failure, right?
Yeah.
And you should have good programs in place to prevent this in the first place. So in those types of scenarios, you need to go back after the investigation and say, okay, why are the gaskets failing? Are we not changing them out enough? Are we using the wrong type of gasket, right? You have rubber gaskets and Teflon gaskets and all these other type of gaskets in facilities. And some applications require certain types of gaskets. Does the maintenance group know that?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And to your point, as an auditor, I'm going to start asking, oh, you're using whatever, this type of gasket. Can you please show me evidence that that material is approved to be in contact with food?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And look at this other thing. Let's say that we are in this facility, Bryan, from scratch. The facility is brand new. All the equipment is brand new, never produced anything. And you are joining two pipes with a gasket. That gasket is coming from a box, brand new. And you install that, brand new. Whomever disassembled that, touch a gasket, eventually clean or blah, 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 and then reinstall is the person that is responsible to watch for the condition of the gasket at that time. Now, is it possible, and this is by, mechanical background, is it possible that when you're installing, you are pinching the gasket and breaking the gasket? Yes. When you're going to realize that the next time that you check. So if you check that gasket once per month, you're going to realize 1 month after that, and you're going to put 1 month on hold. But if you check that gasket on a daily basis, you can only put on hold 1 day of production. Yeah. What is easier to check, 1 day or 1 month?
1 month is gone, right? It's in 1 month is gone. It's in the marketplace, right? It's out there.
And not like you consume, by the way.
Yeah. And if you're working in maintenance, right, changing gaskets is a lot of work. And it comes up on the PMs. Go with the maintenance department and make sure they're following up on their PMs for those programs. And here's something interesting as well. Here's a little tip too, is the harder the location to change the gasket, the less likely. So if you if you have lots of piping that they're running up above the ceiling, for example, or along the roof in the production area, what are the chances that maintenance is getting up on a monthly basis on a scissor lift and changing out all those gaskets? Probably pretty low.
Yep. Unless it's part of the hazard analysis and people are really watching for potential inclusion in those areas.
Yeah. And as well, within the maintenance program, gaskets aren't cheap. And if you're changing them out a lot, the maintenance guys are going to be looking at this and saying, okay, well, what's the cheapest gasket I can use? That may not be the right answer, right? Yeah. If you have hard to get to areas accessible, it may be better to buy and install a higher quality gasket that costs a little bit more, but you don't have to change it as much.
Yes, it makes total sense. Actually, Bryan, when we're dealing with physical hazards, because most of these hazards are pretty much related with the maintenance program, look at this one. I remember helping a company because they were having a lot of problems with gaskets. And when I was having this conversation with the mechanic was telling me, Jose, you see that when you are trying to align these two pipes, they're a little bit misaligned. Oh. And when you are forcing them to align to put the gasket is when the gasket breaks. And I'm going to say, okay, what is the root cause of your problem? It's the misalignment. Don't try to install the gasket if you know that it's not going to work. Go to the root cause, make the necessary changes. It's the installation of the equipment. Make sure that they are aligned. And then, okay, proceed with the changing of the gasket. They fix that, done. It's simple as that.
Yep. So again, right? Yeah. So, we're out of time. So we'll bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level, Jose. I think kind of from my perspective is really the theme of our talk today for the control of all these physical hazards is prevention.
Yeah. It's 100%, Bryan, prevention. Why? And the answer is very simple. Foreign matter is not food. And if it's not food, cannot be present.
Right.
Yep.
Bam. I could not have said it better. So I'm going to put here in the chat. So the locals group that we have, again, this is a free group, guys. Join here, and 2 or 3 times a week, I send out notifications of recalls and other information that I find interesting, right? So you may not find it interesting. If you don't, that's fine. You don't have to subscribe, but it's free, right? I do this, and this is part of the way, and this gets back to what we talked about in the beginning. This is how I keep current and I keep learning about all of these new things, right? It's kind of like we were just talking about with cultured fish fillets, right? We're creating a brand new product and we're removing physical hazard. Are we introducing new hazards? Maybe, right?
Maybe.
Who knows, right? We need to figure these things out. The world is constantly changing, so we need to keep ahead of that. And that's why you're here. And we thank you for that, taking time out of your Friday to spend an hour with us to increase your knowledge and share your information as well, too. Duncan, Daru, other people here within the comments, thank you, right? This makes this so much fun, right? It's enjoyable, right? Having these interactions, because part of the challenge in what we do is we get locked in little bubbles, right? We work for a company and we talk to the same people and we don't have opportunities to get out as much as we'd like to. This is the opportunity to expand your network and improve your knowledge and prevent these type of things. And what I always look at these type of things, Jose, is if I'm able to take one new little piece of information and apply that in some way, that's how we grow, right?
Yep.
So with that, guys, we'll close out the chat here for today. As usual, Jose, just a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for sharing it with everyone. I greatly appreciate it. And everybody, we will see you back here next Friday for the next chat. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and we'll be here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So look out for our next guest, and we'll have our next topic next week. So in the meantime, good job this week. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you back there then. Have a great weekend, Jose.
Bye-bye. You too, guys. And Bryan, thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye.